Hello and praise God. I want to believe that we are doing well in the Lord. Today we want to look at agriculture paper 1. That is a paper that was done 2025 term 3 from the West Kenya Union examination form 3 paper. So let's be attentive even as we go through the paper together.
Okay, so we begin with our first question. That is, remember we have always 3 sections in agriculture paper. Section A is usually compulsory, where you are supposed to do all the question and totaling to 30 marks. Then section B is also compulsory, made of mostly short structured question and probably diagrams also. And then section C, which is an essay where you are given 3 questions. Out of the 3, you select 2. So let's begin with question 1. State 4 ways by which plant nutrients may be lost from the soil. So even as we answer this question, we have to remember that plants lose plants lose nutrients through natural processes, and these processes include leaching, erosion, denitrification, burning of vegetation, and so many other ways. Otherwise, for our case here, the correct answers are supposed to be burning, through leaching, through soil erosion, through volatilization. Remember, volatilization is where solid particles sublime or solid particles are changed to gaseous state, And then we have denitrification. This is probably a biological process. And then we have also uptake by weeds or other plants. Okay, question 2. Give 2 harmful effects of high population density in a maize crop grown for grain production. Now, remember that when we have high population density in maize, it means that our maize is overcrowded. And therefore, there is a stiff competition of resources. And these resources include sunlight, nutrients, and even water. So this weakens them and even increases the chances of spread of pests and diseases. Therefore, our answers include but not limited to spread of pests and diseases, competition of resources, and then poor yield. Let's move on to question 3. State 3 conditions under which opportunity cost is 0 in a farming enterprise. Now, opportunity cost is 0 when a farmer has no alternative enterprise to choose from, or when there are enough resources to produce all the enterprises without need of sacrificing any of the 2 or more enterprises. So therefore our answers could be when there are no alternatives, and then when there are enough resources available. Okay, question 4. Name 3 ways of maintaining soil fertility. Name 3 ways of maintaining soil fertility. So how do we maintain soil fertility? Practices such as crop rotation, adding fertilizer, practicing mulching, and even cover cropping maintain soil fertility. In the same event, also when you maintain the soil structure, ensuring that there is good aeration and water retention also maintains soil fertility. Probably you also have to control weeds because remember we have just said initially that weeds also contribute in the uptake of soil nutrients. So when you control the weeds, you are also increasing the chances of our soil being nutritious. Everything here is aiming at keeping the soil productive and for a long time. Okay, so let's look at part B of question 4. Explain the following terms as used in agricultural economics. And number one term is economic injury level. Now, economic injury level is basically the point where pest damage exceeds what a farmer cannot tolerate economically. And I usually say that when you go to your farm of kales and you find that you have 100 plants of kales, and then you are walking through your farm and you find we have around 2 or 3 aphids in your farm, that one does not justify you to go and purchase a whole 20 liters or even 10 liters of pesticides. Why? Because when you calculate the amount of money you will use to control the pest, and then you relate it to the amount of money that you get after maybe selling the kale, you'll realize that you'll be making a loss. And our aim in agriculture is always to make profit. Therefore, economic injury level, in other terms, is just damage caused beyond tolerance. Integrated pest management, this is actually combining both chemical and cultural methods of controlling what? Pests. Okay. Now, question 5. State 4 objectives of land settlement which have been undertaken in Kenya. Now, when we talk of land objectives of land settlement, these are basically the reasons why this land settlement reform is being practiced. Now, this question is asking us whether we know of this reform. You cannot talk of the achievements of the objectives if you don't know the objectives themselves. So, if you can know the objectives that were there as land settlement reform was being put in place, then this question becomes easy. Some of the answers include to settle the landless, meaning the landless have been settled. So you see, it's an objective, yes, but achieved. Actually, we see people have been settled. And then increase in agricultural production. We've seen that there's quite an increase in agricultural production after land settlement. Employment have been created, opportunities of employment have been created. Then there have been also reduction of population pressure in densely populated areas. For example, the urban areas where initially was much and densely populated. Most of the people have been resettled back to their rural areas, and they have been given opportunities there to still work and continue earning. So no reason for going back to the urban areas. Question 6. State 2 ways of crop rotation. We usually do crop rotation in several ways, but mostly we do rotation according to the plant families. That is one of the way. Assuming that in this plot A we had tomatoes last season, we don't come this season and include and plant there tomatoes or any plant related to tomato, which is Solanaceae family. Rather, we can bring in another plant which is from another family. Then we can also do rotation according to nutrient requirements. For example, we have crops that are usually heavy feeders, then we have medium feeders, and then we have those that are light feeders, basing on the amount of nutrients that that crop requires. Part B of question 6. State 3 challenges encountered by farmer when marketing tomatoes. These are questions coming from either economics or also from crop production under vegetables. Remember, tomatoes are highly perishable. So it is a problem, it is a challenge. The high perishability of tomatoes is a challenge to producers of tomatoes. Then price fluctuations. Remember, the producers are majorly again the suppliers. So when there is a fluctuation in price, it gives them a challenge to calculate or even predict or plan for their what? Or for their budget, assuming that they want to know from the production expenses, what are we going to get after the sales. So when there's fluctuation of prices, it gives them a challenge. Then we have poor transport and storage facilities. Since these fruits are perishable, they require good transport so that they can reach quickly to the market, and also if not, they can be stored well in good storage facilities. But that's a challenge to the farmers because the two are not up to the standards that we expect. Question 7. Give two roles of microorganisms in the soil that are beneficial to crops. Now, when we talk of microorganisms, these are living organisms but tiny in nature, and they are found inside the soil. They actually do a lot and help quite a lot in soil formation and even other activities taking place in the soil. For example, they are helpful when it comes to decomposition of organic matter. And then they also help in nitrogen fixation. Our next question, part B of question 7, state 3 properties of soil that are influenced by its texture. When we talk of texture, remember this is the roughness or smoothness of soil particles as felt between the fingers. So some of the properties of soil that are influenced by texture include water holding capacity. Then we have aeration. Remember the air spaces found within the soil particles. And then we have the drainage. There's a difference between water holding and drainage. Remember, water holding is the ability of water to retain, or of soil, sorry, the ability of soil to retain water that can be used by crops. And then when you talk of drainage, that is the ability of soil to allow much or excess water to infiltrate through the soil particles. Question 8. What is meant by the term changing the cycle in coffee growing? Changing the cycle is basically pruning to shift bearing from one part of the plant to another, and this shifting is done so as to maintain what? Productivity. So basically, this means pruning to shift coffee production from one part of the plant to another. And remember, it helps to maintain long-term productivity by preventing branches from exhausting themselves. Okay, so let's move to the next question, question 9. State 4 functions of calcium in plant growth and development. We all know that calcium is very, very critical when it comes to cell division. It helps in strengthening cell walls. Remember, calcium is a strong element, and then it neutralizes soil acidity, and also calcium promotes root development. Put in mind, deficiency of calcium leads to blossom end rot or poor root formation. Okay, question 10. State 4 factors that contribute to the competitive ability of weeds. Why is it so hard to control weeds? Number 1, weeds dominate because they have efficient dispersal mechanism. They also grow rapidly. They have high seed production, and also weeds can survive in harsh conditions. For example, in the event that we have dry seasons, weeds can still survive, which is not the case in our crops. Crops cannot survive in harsh climatic conditions. We have to intervene as farmers. Question 11. State 2 non-chemical methods of controlling storage pests in a maize granary. You can use airtight containers or conduct proper drying before storage. It is very important in rural farming systems. This is a very important method of controlling storage pests in rural areas. Question 12. 3 branches of horticulture. We have 3. There are only 3, where we have olericulture, growing of vegetables, pomoculture, growing of fruits, and then floriculture, growing of flowers. Now, it is pomoculture, not pomology. Pomology is basically the study of fruits, but when we are cultivating, it becomes pomoculture. So there is that confusion of pomoculture and pomology. Question 13. Give 3 advantages of tissue culture in crop production. Tissue culture is basically growing, bringing out new plants from plantlets, probably in the lab, in controlled environment. What's the essence of all that? Number one, tissue culture produces disease-free planting materials, meaning these materials are free from diseases and disease-causing organisms. Number two, they are also rapid when it comes to multiplication. They multiply rapidly and increase faster in number. Then there is uniformity and crop quality. Uniformity in quality, because these are just clones. They are basically replicas of the stem of the main plantlet which was used. Question 14. 4 ways in which burning of vegetation may lead to loss of soil fertility. Now, burning kills beneficial microorganisms that helps to decompose organic matter, and then nitrogen is also lost through volatilization when exposed to heat. And so you see, burning of vegetation can expose the nutrients to adverse environmental condition. Then it also exposes the soil to erosion by removing the protective cover. Burning also destroys organic matter, and also burning alters or changes the soil structure and fertility of the soil. Okay, next question. Give 2 ways in which pastures are classified. Pastures are classified according to stand, where we have when we talk of a stand, this is where we have pure stands or mixed stands. Then according to establishment, where we have the artificial and natural pastures. And then according to ecological zones, where we have high altitude pastures, low altitude pastures, and even medium altitude pastures. Question 16. State 4 characteristics of a good fertile soil. For us to say that a soil is fertile, it must have good water holding capacity. It must be having adequate amount of nutrients to supply to the crops. Then it must also have good drainage, meaning I've just explained the meaning of drainage initially. And then it must also have good aeration, which I've already also talked about it. Question 17. State 4 methods of farming. Now, we have different methods of farming, but put this in mind. Don't confuse methods of farming with systems of farming. I know some other sources may put them together and make them seem like the same, but according to our KLB and our syllabus, these seem to be like 2 different things. For example, when we talk of methods of farming, we have methods like mixed farming, nomadic farming, or pastoralism, shifting cultivation, agroforestry, and then organic farming. Those are methods of farming, and I will give you as an assignment. Please ensure you give examples of those methods of farming as used or practiced in Kenya: mixed farming, nomadic pastoralism, then shifting cultivation, and then agroforestry and organic farming. Now do that, and you can send it to the email or the number that is provided at the introduction part. Now, let's move to question 18. This is the section B of our paper, and there's also always an instruction there that you answer all the questions in the section in this section in the spaces provided. So question 18 is about fertilizer calculation or fertilizer rate calculation, where we have this question: if the recommendation is to apply 42 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare and the farmer owns 2 hectares of land, how much would it cost him to provide sulfate of ammonia 21% nitrogen, which contains 21% nitrogen, at the rate of 1,500 Kenyan shillings per 50 kg bag? 3 marks. Now, this question tests whether you can calculate nutrient content and convert the recommendations into actual fertilizer amounts. So always start by finding the total nitrogen needed. As you've seen there, we have 42 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare. When you multiply by 2 hectares of land, we get 84 kilograms nitrogen. And then, since sulfate of ammonia has 21% nitrogen, you have to divide the required nitrogen by 0.21 so as to get the total fertilizer needed. So you find that the total fertilizer needed here will be 400 kilograms of sulfate of ammonia. Then the bags required. How do we find the bags? You take the 400 kilograms, which are the total amount of fertilizer needed, divide by the 50 kg of fertilizer which is required in each bag. Then you get that we shall need 8 bags of sulfate of ammonia. So then now the next thing is to calculate the cost, whereby if one bag costs 1,500, how much will 8 bags cost? Then we get 8 times 1,500, you get 12,000. So the total cost needed here was 12,000 Kenyan shillings. Okay, move to question 19. Two maize pests are shown in the diagram. Study them and answer the questions that follow. So let's study. Look at the diagram. Look at the diagram very well. Look at the diagram very well. Here we have the diagram X and diagram Y. Diagram X and diagram Y. This is our diagram X, and then this is our diagram Y. You see, when you look closely at diagram X, you probably look at the feeding mouth parts and even the way it is. It is an insect and probably a storage pest insect because it looks like a weevil to us. And then we have diagram Y, which looks like a rodent, and probably by the look of the tail, it's actually a squirrel. So identify the pest in the diagram labeled X and Y. So X is a weevil and then Y is squirrel. So for us to say maize weevil, I'm actually calling it maize weevil because from the question we have that there are two maize pests. So there is no offense if you call it maize weevil, because again, it is always good to be specific. Why? Because maybe we also have other types of weevils, and of course we do, like beans weevil, green gram weevil, and all that. So at what stage of maize production does each pest damage the crop? Now, as I've just said, this X, which happens to be weevil, damages maize while in the store immediately after what? Harvesting. While Y, which is the squirrel, damages maize while still in the field or during their growing period. Give one way of controlling each of the pests in the field. Now, you see, don't get confused. We are controlling weevil also in the field. Why? Because weevils not always come into contact with the maize while in the store. In fact, weevils are, they attack the maize or even the cereals or whichever crop while still in the field. But their action takes place now when they are what? In the store. So that's why we have to be very keen, probably while harvesting. So when we have to be very keen while harvesting. So now we can control weevils by applying recommended insecticide, conduct early planting, or even ensure that we have high levels of field sanitation and also proper timing of harvest. Another why we can also ensure that we have field hygiene, ensure that our field is very clean, then use varieties that are resistant to the attack of that pest. Okay, let's move to question 20. Now, the diagram shows a management practice carried out on a certain crop. Identify the practice. Now, look at the diagram. Look at the diagram. This here is the diagram. Look at this diagram. This one is the diagram. Look at it. There's a kind of something like a stick here, and then this plant is being intertwined or being winded around that pole. That method, we all know that it is staking, because it is only during staking that we can do that. Name 3 examples of crop which are actually these are crops with tendrils that can be done, that can ensure that, or that can be staked. For example, we have passion fruits, we have tomatoes, and then we have pumpkin. Those are crops with tendrils, tendrils, those structures that help these crops to attach themselves to other crops or structures as a form of support. Part C, state 3 reasons for carrying out the above practice. Number 1 reason is to provide support to plants. As I've said, these plants usually mostly have tendrils, which is a structure for support. And then number 2 is to prevent soiling. When we talk of soiling, is preventing these fruits or even plants at large coming in contact with the soil. And then discourage soil-borne pests and diseases, one of the reasons why we ensure there is no soiling. And then enhance the plant to grow in a desired shape and direction. You decide how you want that plant to grow, the shape and even the direction of that crop. Okay, next question. And you realize most of the section B questions are usually diagrammatic, if not calculating. The diagram shows a practice carried out in T. Study and answer the question that follow. Part A, identify the method in the diagram. As you can see, this is basically a method of pruning, because we have something like that is holding the branches, and then we have things like they look like pegs. These ones, they look like pegs. And then we have maybe and even a crop here which we have been already told that it is a what? It is tea. Now, that is actually pegging method or pruning. Why is it necessary to prune a young tea plant as illustrated in the diagram above? Why are we supposed to prune? We do this kind of pruning so as to encourage many plucking points and have a low, broader frame for easy what? Harvesting or easy picking or easy picking. Now, outline the procedure followed when using the pruning method shown above. Now, the method uses a circular ring and pegs to bend branches at about 30 degrees. Then the tips are nipped off to encourage more side shoots. And you must remember that here we are always dealing with the shape, the shoots, plucking, and yield. So your answer at this point should rotate on those: the shape, the shoots. Why are we dealing with the shoots? For plucking. And then why are we doing all this? For higher yield production. So a ring of 30 centimeters made of thin sticks is used. It is placed on branches which are gently forced to bend at an angle of 30 degrees. Then 3 pegs are placed to hold it in position, as you've seen there. And then the tips of the shoots are nipped off. Nipped off. Please look at the meaning of nipping. Nipping. So the shoots are nipped off to encourage the growth of more shoots. To encourage the growth of more shoots. Okay, let's move on to our next question. Okay. The diagram below illustrates a method of irrigation carried out carried out on the farm. So look at this one. This is the method of irrigation. Look at this. We have things like rows, and then we have things like furrows in between. Then we have a main stream which brings the water in the field. So this type of irrigation is basically furrow type of irrigation. And then name two advantages of the above method. Actually, it is simple and cheap to establish, and then it requires less technical skills as compared to other forms of irrigation. Okay, so let's move on to our next question. That is section C, essay questions. Answer any two questions, but for this revision we shall do all the questions. We shall go through all the questions. 23A, explain the precautions that should be observed during the harvesting of pyrethrum. Now, pyrethrum flowers must be picked and handled gently to preserve the pyrethrin content. They should be placed in open woven baskets for aeration, and they should never be compacted. Then, while harvesting the pyrethrum, you should avoid contamination with the soil or water, as impurities reduce quality. Then pick only fully opened flowers and not too young nor too old. Dry immediately to prevent mold or fermentation. Actually, when dealing with pyrethrum, timing is everything. The purpose, actually, to avoid fermentation. Outline 4 advantages, part B. Outline 4 advantages of raising tomato seedlings in a nursery. A nursery allows efficient seed use, especially since tomato seeds are delicate and costly. It simplifies pest and diseases control because the area is small and kinda manageable. Seedlings grow uniformly in the nursery, making field management easier after transplanting. It also saves land, and as the main field is prepared while seedlings are growing. So those are some of the reasons why we carry out nursery programs. Okay, next question, part C. Describe field production of maize under the following subheadings. Ecological requirements. When we are dealing with ecological requirements, we have to be very keen with things like temperatures, then altitude, rainfall, and also the soil. So for example, temperatures, maize require medium temperatures of about 18 to 30 degrees Celsius and altitude of up to 2,200 meters above sea level, and then rainfall of moderate range from 600 to 900 millimeters, which is well distributed throughout the year. And then the soil should be deep, well drained, loam soil with a pH of 5.5 to 7. That's neutral. Another subtopic is selection and preparation of planting materials. Always use certified seeds, and the seeds should also be disease-free, meaning the seeds are healthy. Then select varieties which are suitable for the area, that is based on the ecological requirements of that seed. Okay. Land preparation. We have clearing of vegetation, that is land clearing. And then after land clearing, what follows is primary cultivation, which can be done by plowing, and it is done so as to bury weeds. And then we have secondary cultivation done to break the soil clods and produce a finer tilth. But at this point, remember, actually, maize does not necessarily need fine tilth, so it's not even necessary. But depending on the size of clods, you can do secondary cultivation. Field practices. There must be timely weeding 2 or 3 times, so as to reduce the amount of weeds. You can also do top dressing with CAN or urea at the rate of 200 kilograms per hectare. Then you can also control pests such as stalk borer and diseases such as maize smut. So when we talk of control of pests and diseases, give an example of a pest that can be controlled in maize production and then a disease of the same. Harvesting. We harvest when the cobs are dry and when the husks turn brown. When we talk of husks, husks are the coverings of the cobs. Those materials covering the cobs, those are husks. So after checking on the conditions, whether they are certified the harvesting to be done, the maize is cut and stooked, not stroked, but stooked, then dehusked. So after doing that, the maize is dried to 13% moisture content before shelling and then storing. So you first of all cut, stook, dehusk, dry, and then store after shelling. Okay, next question. Let's move on to our next question. Question 24. Part A. Explain 4 factors that should be considered when selecting seeds for planting. There are so many factors which can be considered when selecting seeds for planting, and in these factors we have to check the purity. Is the seeds free from weeds and foreign materials? The viability. Are the seeds able to germinate or not? And then the adaptability. The seed must be suitable to that local climate and soil factor. The health status of the seeds, they should be free from pests and diseases. The maturity period, how long does the seeds take to mature? The yield potential, are they high yielding or not? The dormancy, the cost and availability of the seeds, are they affordable? Are they available in the market? Then germination percentage and certification. The seeds should be certified and basically by the Kenya Seed Company. Part B. State and explain 4 advantages of minimum tillage in crop production. What is minimum tillage? Actually cultivating, working the farm or land with minimum disturbance to the soil. And it is done so as it can reduce soil erosion by keeping the soil covered. It also conserves moisture by avoiding frequent disturbance. Minimum tillage also cuts down labor and machinery costs. It also improves soil structure and boosts microbial activity. So actually it ensures that the soil is in a long-term health status. Part C. List various methods of harvesting water in the farm. We harvest water in the farm through several methods, and these methods include but not limited to use of dams, weirs and ponds, roof catchment systems, use of micro catchments, and also rock catchments. Our next question, question 25, which also happens to be our last question. Part A, discuss 10 cultural methods of crop pest control. when we talk of cultural methods, these are the activities done in the farm, not even necessarily with the aim of controlling the pest, but they must be done. You just do them. In the event as you are doing the practice, you end up controlling the pest. So when we talk of cultural method, they are not always at the aim of controlling crop pests. So let us look at some of them. We have tillage to destroy eggs, pupa, and this is done by exposing these organisms to harsh environmental conditions. Then we also do early harvesting so that it can enable crops to evade some storage pests such as grain weevil. Then we can use resistant varieties which have natural protective mechanism against pest attacks. We can also carry out crop rotations. So in crop rotation, crops that are susceptible to a particular pest is rotated with that which is not. Crop that is susceptible to a particular pest is rotated with that which is not. Then we have proper spacing, which discourages pests from moving from one crop to another. Field hygiene, you remove crop residues which may host or harbor pests. Use of organic manure, it has been said that farmyard manure discourages pests such as eelworms. And then we have use of trap crops. These trap crops attract pests away from the main crops I mean. And then you can also do timely weeding so that you can destroy alternative hosts to the crop pest. Then you can also do irrigation, not irritation, but irrigation. Types of irrigation such as overhead irrigation controls aphids. Then you can also practice timely planting so as to escape pest attacks. Okay. Next question, part B of question 25. Okay. Describe 5 factors that affect the rooting of sugarcane cutting. Soil temperature, oxygen supply, moisture availability, leaf area, chemical treatment, and light intensity are some of the factors that affect the rooting of cuttings in all the crops. But necessarily in sugarcane, or specifically in sugarcane, we need warm temperature at the root area to facilitate rooting. We also need proper aeration for proper rooting, and then we must have availability of moisture so as to ensure that the leaf are turgid all the time. And then the leaf area around the leaf, when we talk of the leaf area, softwood plants require a lot of leaves to carry out photosynthesis, which is not the case in hardwood plants. Then under chemical treatment, rooting hormones such as indoleacetic acid is usually induced so as to facilitate rooting. And then light intensity, where soft wood cuttings need higher light intensity compared to hardwood cuttings. Okay, the last part, explain 5 practices that maintain good soil structure. When you add organic matter in the soil, it will add humus and maintain the good soil structure that you want. Minimum tillage also ensures that there is little disturbance to the soil structure. When you do proper drainage, it ensures that there is no water logging, and that improves soil aeration. Crop rotation. Deep-rooted crops help in binding the soil particles together, hence maintaining soil structure. Then we avoid overgrazing so as to avoid destroying the cover crops, which leads to soil erosion. So class, that is the end of our paper 1 revision, but you can reach out for paper 2 so that we can discuss and revise more about livestock production and related concepts of paper 2 agriculture. Otherwise, bye bye. We meet again in the next class. Goodbye.